Okay. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm just going to mute you for just a second.
No problem.
Okay, Rockfin. Go live. And here we go.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a special guest with me tonight. Her name is Michelle Louise Bicking. She is running for governor of Connecticut as a Green Party member. Thanks so much for coming on, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening, everyone.
So first and foremost, we've been covering a lot of third-party candidates on this show and on RBN as well. Recently, we actually just featured Michael, who's running for state office in Connecticut as well. He's also running through the Green Party. But I want to get your take on this. Why did you decide to run as a third-party candidate instead of running through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party?
I don't believe in the existence of third parties. There are only parties. This moniker attached to not being attached to the duopoly is really unnerving to me because according to the Constitution, there shouldn't be any existence of parties at all. So I vote with my values. And when I came to Connecticut some 13 years ago, I was looking for a party that represented those values most effectively. The Green Party is the only party that resonated with me because part of their tenets is the focus on ecological justice, environmental justice. A second thing that was really appealing to me because I had been drawn to international affairs. I actually got my first master's in a master's in international program that was focusing on that level of reach. It was a global party. I mean, you have the Green Party in the Philippines, you have the Green Party in Eastern Europe, we have the Green Party in different parts of the Americas. And I really wanted to be a part of a community that was just far reaching and not just centered locally, because I identify as being a global citizen.
Well said. Yeah, we've had a lot to say about the two-party system on this show in particular, and we just don't see any type of real change coming from the Democrats or the Republicans. And so we've been advocating for people to try to start voting for people who are running as an independent or people who are running as, Green Party instead and see how things work out for you. Now, one of the things that I've been highlighting as well is local elections, because I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of focus on the national level. Who's running for Congress? Who's running for president? And I feel like the local elections are often forgotten about. And I feel like that's unfortunate because right now there are governors and there are mayors that are making decisions across this country. And a lot of people are not paying attention to what's going on, or they're not even paying attention to certain ballot questions that could affect them in their state. And I know that with Connecticut, I mean, you're my neighboring state. I'm in Massachusetts. I know that there are things that have been passed in Connecticut, sometimes because there were ballot initiatives in Massachusetts that may have put that pressure on a neighboring state like Connecticut to get that done. So how do you feel about people kind of checking out of local politics and focusing primarily on the national level?
I think it's good policy to really, in a sense of, making a difference where you are. to really be involved in the persons who are saying they're looking to represent you, and finding out what are their deliverables, like what are they looking to accomplish, how are they seeking to accomplish it, what kind of connections have they made to community-based organizations, actually representatives of families, friends, neighbors that live in the neighborhoods that they serve, the neighborhoods that they serve. Like I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, East New York section. And for example, most of the police force, lives out of state. They don't live there. So they really don't have any skin in the game in terms of our long-term livelihood. And I grew up during a time where it was common knowledge that you never call the police in the case of emergency. You call the fire department. One, because they're CPR certified. Two, because they have better manners. And three, because they show up faster than anyone else, including the police. So, it really does make a difference on a local level, and you get more sway in terms of how things are done, neighborhood by neighborhood track. So, yes, I do definitely agree with that.
Well said. I want to take a look here at your site. So, Eric, if you can put this link in the chat for everyone so they can go to this page as well.
Thank you.
Making room at the table for all. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I must give thanks to our elders in the movement for freedom of all peoples, not just people of the diaspora. Fannie Lou Hamer and Shirley Chisholm, most saliently for me. And the thought of this, metaphorical table where decisions are being made, there is a profound absence of those who are most affected by those decisions. And in my mind, it makes sense to have as many people who can afford the time and the effort to be present, because some of us just can't do it. We can't, either we're homebound or we're sick and elderly or shut in, or we may have disabilities that impair our ability to communicate in certain ways. But all of us deserve to be heard. All of us deserve to be fed at that same table. So I always imagine that this movement called My Effort for this governor's race will be something along those lines, where we're making room, we're making space for those who have been shut out, who have been purposely ignored.
Well said. One of the things that's mentioned here in reference to people, it says too frequently policies from both the governor's office and the legislature favor those who already enjoy privilege and fail those who don't. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know Connecticut, I was talking to Michael about this, that there's actually two different Hartfords. There's Hartford, and then there's like West Hartford, which is very different dynamic, different demographics. What do you mean by that when you say that the legislation usually favors those who are already in privilege?
Well, even though Connecticut presents itself as a deep blue state with more progressive values, that is only a paper-thin facade. What actually happens is that the wealthy among us, those who end up in positions of power, often create policies and on a variety of levels, whether it's local, regional, that reinforce existing redlining or gerrymandering practices. I mean, it really does not actually lead to any significant changes for the people who are struggling the most. So, I mean, the dichotomy in Hartford is real. I mean, West Hartford is considered more affluent in some ways, and you can actually see the borders between that and Hartford. The housing quality change, there are more potholes in the street. There's no really practical way to get from one side to the other without making a mad dash across the road. The difference is not just on paper; it's palpable. So it's unfortunate. I mean, even you have two gentlemen that are running for office. One is the incumbent, and the other is a gentleman who's been trying for a number of years to unseat the incumbent. But they're essentially the same person. Wealthy, white, not having any particular investment in those who are living locally or at least outside of Fairfield County. And their values seem to trend in towards those who have more and can bolster their financial campaigns. The constant bombardments of commercials and whatnot to asking for money. Another thing that I didn't mention about the Green Party is that we don't accept any corporate donations in any shape or form. Money is truly the root of all evil in many senses of the world. And actually, the statement is the love of money is the root of all evil, not money itself. And I personally believe that money has no business being in politics at all. From our legislature or people who represent us up in Congress, should not have any stock options, or being able to do behind the scene deals in order to bolster their portfolio. It should not exist. So, I really do believe in my own story and how it brings me to this place. I'm first generation. My family's from the Eastern Caribbean. My father was a carpenter. My mother was a live-out domestic. So she took care of, several children and several families when their parents were out socializing and doing what they need to do in order to be seen. And as a social worker, I've seen the families affected by a lot of these policies, unable to find low-income housing, unable to find ways to bolster their fixed income, unable to find mental health support, So, and I don't think that's any of the priorities of our current administration, as well as the one that's seeking to unseat it.
Well, that's right. That's very much true. And speaking of money, it says here Connecticut is one of the wealthiest states in the country, yet the gap between our haves and have-nots is greater than ever. We have that same problem here in Massachusetts. We're one of the wealthiest states in the country, but the wealth gap here is very large. The Boston Globe did a study about this, particularly just with Boston, and they said that the average net worth of a Black family in Boston is $8, and the average net worth of a white family in Boston is over $250K. And you just can't deny like that type of disparity. But when that article came out, a lot of people were shocked, and some people were clutching their pearls and were just kind of like, how could that happen here? We're so progressive. And I'm like, are we though, when it comes to wealth and when it comes to equity?
Well, those are conversations that folk get very rattled by when we talk about wealth distribution, more equitable wealth distribution, not just in Connecticut or New England, but throughout the country, if not the world. What they see is their wealth being taken from them, but it's not something that was theirs to begin with. I'm doing an article on reparations and revisiting what it would look like in terms of, taking a step beyond what I've seen in recent years about the concept of reparations, but actually talking about what it would look like to apply the concept into real life in terms of, the different aspects of reparations, which is not just financial. So, it's really unnerving because people think that, some people are very heavily identified and invested in monetary gains. And the thought of sharing that wealth, literally and figuratively, with anyone else, undermines their own existence and sometimes their own identity, as a person. I believe that it's possible that all of us can have an incredible standard of life and living, and it should not be beholden to how much money you make, But I do believe that this country owes a great deal of debt to those who labored and toiled in order for this country to exist, So
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's a balancing act, and I respect where people are coming from if they've never actually had the perspective of how we got to this place in 2022. Even before 1619. But it is something that will, if we do not address our past, the Marfa, the Black Holocaust, the internment camp for Japanese Americans, the wholesale slaughter of First Nations people into the millions. If we do not address all of those things that have happened in our path, there is no way we can do even the simplest efforts to bridge the gap in terms of education, economics, just ability to function on a daily basis. It's just impossible.
In reference to reparations, I want to get your opinion about this because some groups, some ADOS groups believe that reparations should only go to or should be based on lineage, that it should only go to people that you could trace their lineage back to their ancestors were slaves in the United States. And some feel that other people are part of that diaspora should not be included. And this has been a constant conversation about whether or not Black people that their family is from like Jamaica or Trinidad, Tobago, some of those groups feel that those individuals should not qualify for reparations. And I wanted to get your opinion about that.
I have reconciled my position in that I believe that reparations is deserved of anyone who is identified on the 2020 census tract as Black. That's where I stop. It's not at 1965 with the Voting Rights Act. It's not even in the 1800s, because we had seasoned slaves brought from Antigua and Barbados, and intermingled with the enslaved populations in the South. So our destinies are tied. There's no way to separate us, and I wouldn't want us to devolve into conversations of blood quantum, such as some First Nations folks had to do in order to gain recognition by the United States government. So my understanding is that if you identified as Black on this last census tract, you should be entitled to any form of reparations that are due to you. And again, it's not just monetary; it is rehabilitative in nature. It is, being able to commemorate certain events, and not just the Underground Railroad, but other parts of our history that brought us here and keep us here. As well as the history that we come from. Because a lot of that is, I don't recall actually learning African history when I was in high school and grade school. It was all about Eastern Europe and Western European civilizations, as if we didn't even exist. So that's where my position is on that. And when I wrote I'm in the process of finishing up my statement, I made sure that was abundantly clear, because no matter where you came from, what boat stop you were still treated with the same level of disrespect and dehumanizing gaze because of your particular complexion, the width of your nose, all different things about your phenotypical appearance that you cannot control, right? Regardless of where you came from, you were not considered human. So for me, reparation is due to anyone who is Black identified.
That's interesting. You should have a conversation with.
I'm ready. It took a while to get there because, again, I'm first gen. You go back 2 generations, you're in Ireland and England on one side of my family, and the other side of family, I'm not even quite sure, So some people would say, and I've had people approach me already, that you're not necessarily Black enough. You're not necessarily American enough because you cannot trace your lineage back. Most people can't do that anyway, even if they're 4, 5, 7, 8, generations removed from, actually it should be no more than 5 generations removed from the system of enslavement. Records get lost. Records were never taken. Most of the records that people have are because they documented the stuff themselves in their family Bibles, or they may have found the procurement list of former slave masters because we were considered property and they were very detailed about keeping records about their property. But most folk can't do that, So it's unfair to those who don't have the access to the Library of Congress or wherever information like that is stored and are relying on like different, products like Ancestry DNA and, 23andMe to find out exactly where their roots may fall, But our condition is shared, so it should the repair that needs to be done should also be shared.
Well, some would argue that reparations refers back to General Sherman's promise of 40 acres and a mule, which we never got that. Like that never happened, right?
40,000 of us got it. And a proportion of those, I think most of those, the land was taken by subterfuge in the years afterwards. But
and then there were multiple like Black Wall Streets that were burned down.
That's right.
It's a problem. So some people, this has been a constant, I guess, disagreement that has come about in reference to reparations, is that some groups do feel that it should only apply to those who can, trace their lineage back to slavery here in the United States. So for example, if someone moves here from, let's say, Jamaica tomorrow, should they get reparations?
like I said, my thought is based on the 2020 census tract, which is the closest one to whatever decision is made by the HR Commission. Hopefully they'll come up with some, draft policy. Other ones should be eligible for reparations. That's where I stand. Because I'm looking for, personally, a line in the sand that allows for whoever had, because my parent, for example, my parents came here in the late 60s. They still faced the two different sinks, one for black and one for white. My mother remembered, and she very rarely shared this type of information with me. Remember being told that she couldn't be a police officer because she was interested in it, because black women could not serve in that fashion. She wasn't smart enough to be one, and she believed it because she had no other option. There was no one else to tell her, look, you can be anything you wish to be, right? So I don't think anyone is exempt from those experiences because of their arrival date.
Okay.
That's where my head is at right now. From the time that a statement is made, as far as in writing about the draft of what reparations should look like in this country, then from that point, that should be the line in the sand.
So another thing that's mentioned here is making room at the table for all political parties. It says a multi-party democracy would be more representative and less polarizing than the two-party system we have now in place. How can we fix a system that's depriving voters of choices and limiting political discourse? So a big problem that comes up a lot of times with independent and third-party candidates is this idea that you have to reach a certain percentage in order just to join the debate stage. On a national level, some people are not on the ballot in every state. So we know that these problems exist. On a local level, how do you feel about being on the debate stage and the requirements? And do you think there's any way that could be changed, at least in Connecticut?
I wasn't invited to any one of the gubernatorial debates. The first one that happened a couple of weeks ago, as well as the one that's coming up in the next few weeks, because I'm not considered a legitimate candidate. I do not have $75,000 in escrow. I do not have a formal campaign manager, a physical location. I mean, it had very specific requirements. Each League of Women Voters has the ability to stipulate what each candidate should have, available or make available to themselves in order to join other candidates on stage. And according to them, I am not worthy of joining the other candidates on that stage, on that debate stage. I am a write-in candidate at this point, which still means that I am running for office. I've been nominated by the fourth largest party in the state of Connecticut and the fourth largest party in the United States. However, that itself is not enough. And that is very terrifying to me, because that for me, and it's not just me, right? It's anyone who wants to, who feels empowered and passionate about running for a particular series of issues to help their fellow humankind and want to put themselves out there. The fact that it will be denied to them, their literal voice will be not denied, is truly a travesty of justice.
Yes, I interviewed Princess Blanding last year, and she was also running for a gubernatorial position. She ran in Virginia, and she ran into the same problem. She met all the requirements, and she showed up to debate, and they wouldn't let her debate, and her video there went pretty viral. So it's been a big problem. I want to transition here to the first 100 days, because I thought this was really interesting. These are some of the issues that you want to tackle the first 100 days. And there's a couple here that I want to I really want to highlight. Obviously, voting reform. Institute ranked choice voting. Now, in Massachusetts, we had this as a ballot initiative. It didn't pass because a lot of people that I spoke to didn't understand the question. That doesn't surprise me if they weren't paying attention to this and like not really knowing what this means. But institute ranked choice voting and institute default voting registration for all eligible voters, status unaffiliated. Can we talk a little bit about that?
So ranked choice voting, I think the term is slightly off-putting to some folk because they don't know exactly what that means. So being able to, to educate in the sense of what that actually looks like. And I know down here in Connecticut, we're planning some community interface opportunities where we can talk about, the cat, the dog, the wolf, the different options that you have and how each person has the opportunity to share with the public. And then based on ranked choice voting, you can choose whoever best represent you. And the remaining three are the ones who are, are off to petition for your vote. And then as far as registration, the largest group of eligible voters in the state, well, second to those who are um, registered with the DMV and but have not chosen a party, is the unaffiliated vote. They
Okay.
represent 39% of the total voting block. So by themselves, if they voted as a block, they would have the ability to sway every single election in this state, from the governor's office down, right? Um, the reason why I chose unaffiliated because it gives people the option to take the time, hopefully, and avail themselves of the other parties that are available in state. Not to say an unaffiliated standing is something that a person cannot retain, because I know a lot of people who are to take pride in their status as an unaffiliated voter, but at least they have the option. Should they be moved by a particular candidate's speech or what they're seeking to offer, they have the option to go and vote for that person. Um, but I think that it can be off-putting for some people who don't understand the process of registering to vote, even if the option is often tagged along with different applications or whatever. Are you registered to vote? Blah blah blah. Um, it still gives them the power in their own hands to make a difference in their day-to-day lives. So.
Wage reform is another one I wanted to highlight. Increase
Mhm,
minimum wage to a livable wage of at least $25 per hour on
mhm,
a tiered schedule with cost of living adjustments included. Now,
yes,
this
ma'am.
piece is huge. The cost of living adjustments included, because I mean, we passed $15 minimum wage years ago in
Mhm,
Massachusetts, and it just went up each year till you hit that $15 mark. But the cost of living adjustments piece is important, because if the cost of living increases, but the minimum wage does not increase or there's no adjustment for that, then a lot of times people are right back where they were before.
that's right. That's right. So if we were to match exactly where we should be in terms of the very bare minimum of wages, it would be closer to $25 per hour. So that's where I'm starting. That's where I'm
Mhm.
starting, which means that all the positions that are, like, say, for example, my role as a medical social worker, making X amount of dollars per hour, they would have to be adjusted upwards. Otherwise, they may fall, otherwise they may face a great deal of backlash at the HR department. So, I understand that it'll be very interesting. I love that word interesting because it can have a negative and a positive connotation. But it's definitely doable, because the record profits that we're experiencing for some in this country are not actual profits, they're stolen wages. And I think it should be accounted for in how much we pay those from the bare minimum up.
All right. Healthcare reform.
Mhm.
Default registration for all uninsured persons into Medicaid coverage, and
Mhm.
craft a single payer insurance system accessible online. So the
Mhm.
healthcare one has been a huge problem for a lot of people. I do know that Washington State right now has activists that are trying to get single payer passed in Washington State. I
Right.
believe they're still trying to get the signatures to get that on the ballot. In reference to Connecticut, because I'm not sure how it works there in reference to healthcare. In
Mhm.
Massachusetts, we have something called Mass Health. It's not
Mhm.
single payer, but if you're not covered, you can apply for Mass Health, but it's means tested. So you have to fit like a certain income requirement to even get it.
Yeah.
How is it in Connecticut in reference to healthcare? Because I know Connecticut's very expensive.
Very expensive, and actually, I think the ninth most expensive state to live in the country. Eighth, actually. We've moved up in the last year and a half. Um, Connecticut actually has a very robust insurance system through Medicaid. We called it Husky. It was a very interesting compromise by one of the outgoing governors here. What is missing, however, and I avoid saying Medicaid for all, and using a universal health care. Well, I prefer universal health care over Medicaid for all, because Medicaid has certain stipulations that don't allow for such things, such as my role as a clinical social worker. Mental health is often not one of the items that are easily accessible for people, especially for children. So my ideal is a single payer system that encourages strongly the different insurance plans to lobby for the business of those who they're seeking to cover, as well as get the best possible options available for tailored to each family's needs. Connecticut is an insurance state. I mean, we have a lot of the Aetnas, the Cignas. We're all quite much rooted in the culture of Connecticut. And I know they played a huge role in keeping single payer off the ballot. However, it's a huge priority to me because I think that if people don't have to worry about where they're going to get medical attention from, if their provider is accepting of their insurance for a particular procedure, or in case of mental health, can offer regular sessions at their based on availability, then they're less likely to feel a sense of insecurity about their future. So universal health care, as well as universal education, are one of the two priorities of my administration. And my car light just went out. I just left a meeting down in Mystic, and I promised I would stay for an hour, so it didn't give me enough time to go anywhere to speak to you, so forgive me.
No worries.
But universal healthcare and universal education are two of my biggest priorities, because it allows folk to kind of traverse the very present and real economic and social segregation that exists in Connecticut, even behind that deep blue facade.
Well said. And then one more that I want to highlight here, because I've been talking about this a lot as well, is housing reform. This piece here: employ a housing first model for persons struggling with an emphasis on unemployment / underemployment, recently educated persons aging out of foster care, and persons struggling with mental health conditions. I just saw recently in Louisville, Kentucky, they actually are on their way to building homes for homeless, and not necessarily, when I say homeless, for those listening, it doesn't necessarily mean people sleeping out in the street. You can be homeless and not sleep on the street. It means people who are housing insecure. I want to get your opinion about that in particular, that project in Louisville, Kentucky. And then also, how do you think this could be done in Connecticut, this housing first model?
So, kudos to folks in Louisville, Kentucky, who realize the importance of, setting the stage for self-actualization. I need some coffee. For being able to establish a foundation for growth for an individual and their family. You need a home before anything else. Being able to go home to someplace to have your own space where your belongings are there and we can sit down and really just be is incredibly important to a person's mental health, as well as social welfare, right? And there have been many studies over the years that talk about, if you secure a space, and it doesn't have to be big, for someone that is their own and that they can afford, then they're more likely to thrive in, substance abuse training, job training after being released from prison or from the penal system as a whole. They're more likely to thrive because they have something to go back to, something that gives them a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And I recognize that in my line of work as well. One of the things that I combat on a regular basis is families who are facing housing insecurity as well as food insecurity, and it bleeds out into everything. How can you go to work for a 10-hour shift if you're wondering, whether you're going to be evicted on Friday?
Right.
How do you know when you're looking at your salary and you can only afford, $60 for the groceries? I mean, how can you focus on that exam, that term paper that you have to turn in? So for me, housing first is a priority. Once you actually have a place to live, it's easier for you to make a difference in other facets of your life. And as far as what can be done to make that happen in Connecticut, we have a tremendous backlog of blighted properties here. And properties, not just in the sense of actual physical buildings, but of land tracts in both rural centers, suburban, and urban centers. My thoughts on those properties themselves is an institute a land value tax. So the property itself, you would have to pay, instead of a decreased tax rate, you would have to pay for the value of the land itself or the property itself. So that would add to the coffers of the state and allow us to do things like build a low-income housing unit, not affordable housing, because affordable means something totally different to many different people. But if it's tacked on your income and your ability to afford that monthly rent, that's more appropriate for many families that we have out there, as well as single individuals. So looking into reforming, revamping, if not removing completely blighted properties, is one of the ways in which we can add to our stock. In addition to that, using the monies that we gain from legalizing and regulating cannabis, moving to a more progressive tax system that focuses on wealth distribution, especially from Fairfield County, which is our richest county in state, the Gold Coast of Connecticut, would allow us to make even more opportunities where not just, a flat-face housing unit, but actual communities be built from the ground up.
And this piece here, which I think is incredibly important because some people may not know about this, establish legal precedent to regulate purchasing and renting out properties in Connecticut by out-of-state landlords. And this is a big one because some states don't have any type of rule in place that prevents people from doing that. So if your landlord lives in another state and something goes wrong with your apartment or the apartment building, they're not there. They're not within a close distance to be able to come and help you.
Nor are they necessarily vested in helping you at all. So that comes from a very personal experience where I had one of my clients whose apartment building, she had one of the units there, was bought out by an out-of-state landlord. And I was sitting there yelling at this gentleman on the phone because it had gotten heated. He was telling me that, he had offered the opportunity for her to leave when he told her that he was doubling her rent, and she didn't take it. And I said, well, how do you expect her to leave? With what money do you expect her to move? Because you need money to move, right? You need money for the moving expenses themselves, to get supplies to pack your stuff. And money is also time. Who's going to spend the time for, to come out and do that just for nothing? There's $3,000 to $4,000 worth of money that needs to happen in order to move a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment in itself, depending on what the person has. So I'm like, well, how do you expect this woman to move? Couldn't have an answer for that. And then he said, well, I'm paying this huge mortgage and, I have to charge this. I said, well, why did you take on a mortgage that you can't afford? Oh, he didn't like that at all. Didn't like that at all. Right. Because then you're putting the responsibility on them. Why would you put yourself in considerable amount of debt just to hold on to this property and at the same time displace the communities that have been living, or the families rather, who've been living in this unit for 10 years? Like, why would you consider that appropriate? So we have these businesses such as that are marketing themselves as almost freelancers in the game, and they're buying up properties and reselling them to certain other people to either change the entire demographic of a neighborhood, raise the property values so that certain demographics can't afford to be there, and or just crowd out individual buyers who are trying to make a home of their own. So, and I think it's despicable, and that Connecticut should be the first state to legalize protections against those who are being pushed out because of these initiatives by out-of-state, sometimes slum landlords.
And here are just some of the stances and positions for Green Party Connecticut: investment in local and regional mass transit by rail, invest in public banking. Oh, if Roger Meadows is listening, he's going to love this one. That's a big one for him. Ending cash bail, mail-in ballots and ranked choice voting, ending education funding through property taxes, creation and preservation of more preserves, reserves, and wildlife habitats, electric train car manufacturing in state, converting blighted properties and abandoned lots into low-income housing in state parks, eradicating dependence on gas-powered cars and vans in state fleet, promotion of regenerative agricultural carbon sequestration, investment in sequestration,
Mhm.
sorry, investment in community-based restorative justices initiatives, diverting resources to underfunded school initiatives and programming for children, youth, and young adults. Yeah, these are we have a lot of similarities based on state. Like we have a lot of problem. Like we have public transportation here, but it's
Mhm.
terrible. And they shut down like 2 of the lines for 30 days. There's a worker shortage, but the public transportation here has been abysmal for, I'd say, the past 10 years that I've lived here. Money has not been put towards it where it was supposed to. So I don't know what happened to that money. The maintenance
Mhm.
wasn't being done on these trains. And then also with the public transportation, it only goes to certain neighborhoods and to certain areas. So for a lot of people that live in like the low income neighborhoods in Boston, they don't have access to the subway. They only have like a bus.
Right. A lot of the areas here, as well, there are no subways. So what you have is bus to bus connections, and I appreciate the fact, well, due to COVID, ridership has increased because there are no bus fares; they're free. So you see a lot of people who had been, essentially car hopping, borrowing cars, walking, doing whatever they need to do to get to work, are now using the bus line. I would like to extend that into perpetuity, that the bus lines are free, because that only helps people get from place to place. We do have a standing freight line or series of freight lines in state that can be repurposed. Repurposed to include regional and intra rail lines. A lot of the focus in the past has been, in my humble review of it, has been focused on the 95 corridor and rail transportation to and from like New York, but not really what people in state need. I mean, we have the quiet corner here, which is a portion of the state that is a little bit more rural, a little bit more far removed from the hotspots of Bridgeport and Hartford, but has a credible amount of cultural and even environmental diversity. But at the same time, in the midst of that, are very estranged from a lot of different, opportunities that they can find elsewhere. So I imagine, like, if you're living in far-flung areas of Stonington, that you can hop on a train and be anywhere in the state in less than 45 minutes. I mean, that's the idea, right? I believe that we are the only country out of the G8 that doesn't have like mass transit system, that the super fast, the bullet train level train. We're the only country that doesn't have that. And since we market ourselves as an empire, you know, the fact that we pay so little to what our constituents need, it's just nightmarish to me. And growing up in New York, I'm very spoiled. I enjoyed the fruit of those trees, of those mass transit trees. I can hop on a train and be anywhere I chose to be, So it really allows for mobility in all senses of the word, economic mobility. If you're able to find a job elsewhere where there's a train line that you can get off and maybe catch a shuttle, it offers the opportunity for kids who grew up in the so-called inner city to go to libraries, aquariums, other venues that would normally be outside of their reach or dependent to get to by car, and they can use mass transit to get there. So I think it's that is the third priority on my list of priorities overall, is to develop a strong, resilient mass transit system in state.
And it says here, Room at the Table is an anti-establishment, anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, worker-led campaign founded on universal themes of social justice, human rights, peace, and the dignity of all persons to live and thrive in Connecticut. What are some of the things, and I ask this because I think that people have this fairy tale of what they think Connecticut is like. A lot of times when we see Connecticut depicted, especially through Hollywood, it's usually the Stepford Wives or like Greenwich, Connecticut, that type. What do you think are some of the things that people get wrong about Connecticut, and how would you describe what Connecticut is really like to people who may live in a different state per se?
It's interesting because yes, the impression of the Wall Street hounds that work in Manhattan and then have these lush sprawling estates in the corner of the state. And then if you go a little further, it's as if you're going into the Badlands, Bridgeport, Stratford, Hartford. When that comes up in the news, people often think it's like a drug den, where people are
Mhm.
loose and fast with money, and there's just crime, everywhere which way you turn. But Connecticut is an incredibly beautiful, incredibly diverse, and wonderful place to live and raise children. We have some of the best schools in the country right here. We have some of the best vistas in terms of being, out and about in nature. We have a coastline with phenomenal beaches that, the general public can have access to. In some ways, there are private places, of course, but the public beaches and the community spaces are just vast and amazing. I feel privileged to be able to raise my son here. All right. So I think that there needs to be an understanding that everywhere you go, there are places in light and places in darkness. Right. There's some things that are beautiful and wonderful and just a joyous place to live. But then there are other elements that need to be addressed in some fashion. The hidden poverty, which is actually not so hidden, it's quite blatant in many parts of our state. Um,
Mhm.
the lack of opportunities for people who don't have a college education, or even those who do have a college education can't find work because sometimes they're being outpaced by those who have more time in the job. Or like myself in the 90s, I was looking for work in an environment where there were 4 generations that were still present. I grew up thinking that a job would be waiting for me once I did what I was supposed to do, right? Go to college, get that degree, you know what I mean? And fill up my resume with volunteer and other career experiences. So when I was ready to jump in, there was nowhere for me to jump, you know? And I think the aftershocks of that are still being felt today. So, like any place, like I said, there are places in light and there are places in darkness. But overall, I think Connecticut has so much potential to offer its residents, and really should be a beacon to New England in terms of what we can do cooperatively if we have enough political will.
Well said. All right, Michelle, how can people support your campaign?
Oh my goodness! Keep me in your prayers, first of all. Um, I come from a family that believes in the power of prayer. Um, So, definitely do that. If you would like to get in touch, feel free to reach out to me on my website, which is www.roomatthetable4.us. And I believe it was posted in the chat. Thank you again, Eric. Um, you can call me. I'm not afraid to give my Google Voice number, 860-255-8189. This weekend, I'll be at the End Hate Rally in Torrington. It's one of 4 or 5 rallies that are happening throughout the state. I was at the rally in Middletown about 2.5 weeks ago, and we talked about how joy and love are the 2 ways that we combat hate and hatred in this state, and how they are calls to really rally around what's the good in all of us, but at the same time be very upfront about addressing injustices, to the bulk of us. So you can reach me in those 2 ways. If you want to email me, bicking.michelle@gmail.com. I am always available to anyone who wants to check in, to talk policy, to talk about God, anything. If you need some social work help and a listening ear, sister is a social worker, birth doula, former first grade teacher. I got you. Just give me a call. Reach out any way you wish.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. I have another Green Party candidate coming on next week. So it's been like three or 4 of you this month. But thank you so much for coming on, and good luck.
Thank you so much, my dear. Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys. What is going on? That's right. It's Thursday. You guys know I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'll be in DC. I'll get into that later on. But I do want to go ahead and highlight some of these comments and then shout out patrons. And then we'll get into the other news stories. Check out Michelle's website. Michelle's really cool. We got to highlight these third-party candidates, whether they're local or national. Thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Bingo, ding, ding. And the win goes to her. JB is in the chat. Social workers are wonderful. I have one at my dialysis center. They really care. Capitalism makes their job harder. Job. See, whenever we were talking about like Boston people, like I don't know what's happening with me. We were talking about Bill Burr earlier and like losing my R sometimes. Thank you so much for the super chat, Roger. New York State is #1 in income inequality, the Northeast. And that's because of New York City. That's because of New York City. Sometimes people think that all of New York, like the entire state, is crazy expensive. That's not true. You just got to get away from New York City. Solidar. Sabby, is Michelle Louise Bicking going to debate the Democrat and Republican candidate? Yeah, so she said she has not been invited to the debate, unfortunately. Shout out to Delthea, who's a Sabby member. There is nothing keeping any group from demanding reparations from the government that profited from the exploitation of that group. Ooh, Delthea, bringing the fire there. Thank you for this super chat, Roger. Problem is, if you base it on race, when it is challenged in court, it will be shut down as a violation of the 14th Amendment. See, this is an interesting discussion. I want to have a panel on this one day. I've had people come on and talk about reparations before, but I want to have an actual panel discussion because people have different opinions about it, who should get it, how it should go, and all of that jazz. Thank you for the super chat, Debo the Black Panther. Her argument is nonsensical and world terribly weaken. Oh, I think you mean would. Her argument is nonsensical and would terribly weaken our case for reparations. See, this is why we need to have this panel. We need to have this panel. Omar says, great interview, Sabby. And Danny said, what's happening in DC, Sabs? Julian Assange rally this Saturday. I will be there. I'm one of the speakers along with many people. I'll show you that promo later on. That's why I won't be here tomorrow night because I'm heading out tomorrow morning in the morning. All right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. We go ahead and share them here. And I hope you don't hear a dryer in the background. It's really loud on my end. If you do hear it, let me know. Shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Those are all those wonderful people scrolling across the bottom there. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate your support. And I do want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. We like to call them newbies. Let's give it up for Carlos and for Malcolm Gray. Thank you guys so much. Welcome, welcome, welcome all. All right, I see some of you saying in the chat that you don't hear it. That's great. Because it's really loud on my end. Rick said washing clothes too. Yes, I'm telling you, I had to do at least one load before I leave, because then if I came back home, then I would have to do laundry. I would have to do 2 loads of laundry instead of 1 load. So I had to do 1 load before I go. So I only had to do 1 load when I get back. Based. All right, guys, what are we talking about tonight? Let's go ahead and take a look at that thumbnail. Let's dive right in. Doobie-doobie-doo. All right, tonight we are discussing AOC hypocrisy. What did AOC do and why is she being hypocritical? We are going to take a look back at something that she said in the past and her actions today. We're also going to discuss Cori Bush's new book. I have a lot to say about that. Oh, these Justice Democrats they've totally sold out. We're also going to discuss trucker strike. Yes, it's happening. I wanted it to happen. We're going to get into that story. I'm super pumped about that. And of course, Michelle was just here as the third party candidate spotlight. So welcome all. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, let's get into our first story, which is the trucker strike. So if you have not heard, there are truckers who are on strike right now. Massachusetts and New York State. And this could spread if their demands are not met. Now, we were just hearing about the railroad workers that were on strike. And I said, wouldn't it be great if the truckers joined them, if they paired with them and said, you know what? We're not being treated fairly either. We're also going to go on strike. It is now happening. And let's see if this could spread. Now, shout out to Teamsters because they tweeted this out. It says Sysco strikes continue as talks break down. After more than 6 hours of talks, negotiations between Teamsters and Sysco broke down Wednesday evening. As a result, more than 500 workers in Syracuse, New York, and Plimpton, Massachusetts, continue their strike against the company's unfair labor practices. Let's give a shout out to these guys doing the damn thing. It says 317 stands strong. 120 supports, it's either 120 or I-20. I think it's 120. 120 supports 317's fight Teamster strong. And this is the Sysco truck back here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sysco, but we have them. They're pretty big here in Massachusetts. They're usually always hiring too, which is interesting. Oh dear. So let's get into more details about this. Now, I found out about this on the local level first. So it says, this is Boston.com. Massachusetts trucker strike raises concerns about disrupted food delivery. What did I tell you guys? I told you, you got to get the truckers to join. The Sysco warehouse in Plimpton, south of Boston, is still operating 24/7 with third-party drivers and hope to be up to 50% of normal capacity by Wednesday. Now, today's Thursday. The negotiations didn't work out yesterday, which was Wednesday. So here we are. All right, let's go on. Hold on to your food, guys. Hold on to your donuts, your loaf of bread, and that milk that sits in the back of the corner, because who knows what is going to happen from here. More than 300 truck drivers at New England's largest wholesale food distributor have gone on strike. 300. Raising concerns about disrupted food deliveries to schools, hospitals, and nursing homes. It's hitting hard, guys. The drivers represented by the Teamsters Local 653 took to the picket line at Sysco Boston early Saturday, seeking better pay and benefits. Management took their aberrant anti-worker treatment to new lows. Can't talk. Giving a take it or leave it final offer that strips their essential workers of high quality union health insurance. Oh, what do you know? How do you know that health insurance was going to be one of the complaints, one of the benefits that they're fighting towards? How did you know? Of course. Denies members of a secure retirement with a union pension and offers meager wage increases amid drastically rising inflation. You know, what a corrupt system that we have. They don't want to give these people high quality health insurance. They don't even want to give them some type of retirement pension. This is capitalism. This is capitalism for you. Let's go on. Last week, about 230 drivers at a Sysco facility near Syracuse, New York, also went on strike, alleging unfair labor practices. Sysco said in a statement that the Massachusetts drivers make about $110,000 annually on average, and that it has offered a wage increase of 25% of the life of the contract. The Houston-based company also said it is offering more healthcare options at lower costs compared to the current plan. Here's the thing about the healthcare issue. If we had Medicare for all for everyone in this country, we wouldn't have to worry about this. This would not be an issue. Employees would not have to sit up there and fight their own employer over having decent health insurance plan. This is what happens when your health insurance is tied to your job. Here we go. The work stoppage is unnecessary, and union leaders have taken this action with little regard for damage it will cause to our associates and our customers. Now, that's coming from the company there. I disagree with that statement from the company. I'm pretty sure the workers know exactly the type of damage that it is going to cost the customers. That's exactly why they're doing it, because they know it will have an impact, because they want you to meet their demands. So this is the option that you have, Sysco. You either meet their demands or your customers will suffer. That's how it works. There's no middle of the road. There's no in between here. So do you want your customers to suffer? Probably not. So you should just give them what they're asking for. See how this works? This would be great. Imagine if this spreads to other states. If the other truckers contact other states and say, yeah, we're on strike. You guys should join us. We're on strike. Come join us. Let's shut this system down. In New York, the union did not allow drivers to vote on the company's offer, which included wage increases and a $2,500 signing bonus. That's coming from Sysco. Tara Gregorio, president of Massachusetts Senior Care Association, an industry representing about 400 nursing homes and assisted living residences, said Tuesday that the truckers' strike has raised concerns among some members, but that she has not heard of any missed deliveries. Nursing homes are also prepared to adapt, seeking alternate sources for food as they did during the pandemic and recent supply chain slowdowns. I wonder how the family members who have relatives in those nursing homes, I wonder how they would feel about that. What are these alternate food sources that you're looking towards? Is this healthy food? Is this food that is really going to nourish their bodies? Look, I worked in a skilled nursing facility. I know what the food is like. The food was already not that good to begin with no trucker strike. So I also know how much it costs to keep your relatives, your family in those nursing homes. I know how much a private room in a nursing home can cost. I know how much a shared room in a nursing home can cost. And even in a state like South Carolina, which has a lower cost of living, you had people paying $6,000 a month for a private room in a nursing home. People who were pretty much at the last stages of their life. $6,000 for a room. $3,000 for a shared room. If I'm paying $6,000 a month for someone in my family to have a room, oh, you better give them the best food possible. There is no alternate food sources. You better be giving them the Ritz. Let's go on. We're hoping that the two sides can come to some type of an agreement very quickly. The Sysco warehouse in Plimpton, south of Boston, is still operating 24/7 with third-party drivers and hopes to be up to 50% of normal capacity by Wednesday. Again, we heard that didn't happen and that the truckers rejected the deal that was offered. The company said the facility stocks about 13,000 products, according to the company's website. Sysco, which also services restaurants and sports venues, has distribution facilities across the country. Did you hear that, New England Patriots? Did you hear that, Gillette Stadium? Did you hear that? Sysco's huge, you guys. It's a huge company. And here are pictures here of the truckers doing their damn thing. You see them? See how they all come together? It's an all-out worker revolt at Sysco. Boston walks out on strike. That walkout happened at midnight. They were like, we're out of here. Done. This is the power of the worker, especially when your job affects the food chain, the supply chain. Hell, you could ask for a lot more right now because they need you. They really do need you. While you're at it, throw in anything else that you've been thinking about. Just throw that in the list of demands. Throw it in. Oh, yeah, by the way, we want to get 5 weeks vacation a year, at least 5 at a minimum. Add those things in there too. Robert says, will there be a live stream of this rally? Yes, I will be streaming Saturday. And Eric's going to come there too. So I'll have some help. Rodrigo, whoa, Sabby hit 22K. Don't forget us little people later on Sabby. Oh, of course I wouldn't forget you guys, Rodrigo. Yeah, I did. I saw that this morning. I did hit 22K. That's crazy. I feel like I just got to 20 at some point, but that's thanks to you guys. Like, you guys have been like great support. Yeah, I'm very thankful and very grateful. I never thought I'd get to 10K, to be honest. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Saul Good. Sun Moon, let's all go on strike. Shut it all down. The truckers, the railroad workers, and the port workers, put all 3 of those together, and that is your general strike. You really don't need everyone to quit working like their retail jobs, their restaurant jobs, working at the universities. All those people can remain in place. And if you just had those 3, that's your general strike. Shutting down the supply chain. Yep, X. Sysco and other companies like them have huge turnover rates because of how demanding they are. I could see that. Bad cookies. Mass transit general strike. Get truckers, train conductors, bus drivers, dock workers, and ship sailors to strike. Hit them in the pocket where it hurts. They will fill 10 demands and even for more. I bet you Eric really likes that statement. Thank you so much for the super chat, SFT. Shout out to KC Tenants Power Launch this Saturday, Illis Davis Park, KC, Missouri, 1230, wear gold. So go, those of you that are in that area, Nick knows about KC Tenants, but those of you that are in that area, if you can make it, check that out. Thanks so much for that. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. She got me on party abolition, lost with race-based reparations. That's nothing but tethering, but brought me back with public banking. Will she bring me back with worker co-ops? And thank you for this tip as well, Roger. Your dryer loud as hell, so you can't hear it? I don't know. Regarding reparations, our ancestors were brought here by force. Sabrina, her parents came here by choice, knowing what they were getting into. Big difference. Freedmen are still the majority Black population in the U.S. You start talking like that, you just put up another barrier in addition to you being third-party barrier. Abolish corporations and convert Sysco to worker-owned cooperative. Ooh. Yeah, I really do. I want to have a panel discussion on that so we can get everybody's thoughts and opinions on that. All right, let's get into our next story. Now, this one is about Cori Bush. So for those of you who are not aware, Cori Bush has a book now. She was celebrating it with other members of the squad. And this is one of the things that I did tell you a while back. There are certain perks that they get if they're there for at least 5 years. Actually, you can get a book deal regardless if you've been there maybe 2 years, but then you decided to write a book. You just need a publisher, basically. But this is something that comes with the package, right? They get the book deal, they get speaking engagements and speaking fees. So this is another way that they make money that's not necessarily through their position as a congressman or a congresswoman. So they make money in other ways. So Cori Bush recently was interviewed about her book and about the midterms. And I want to give a shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Always doing great work. I want you to hear what Cori Bush is saying in this interview and why you should be deeply, deeply concerned about these progressives that are in Congress. Listen to this.
Of Missouri. She's out now with her new memoir entitled The Forerunner, a story of pain and perseverance in America, and we look forward to talking about that in just a moment. But first, want to just bounce off of the Speaker Pelosi's comments. How do you feel Democrats will fare as they head toward the midterms?
I'm optimistic. I believe that we will hold the House. I'm optimistic because since the I will call amazing win in New York just a little while ago, and then also in Alaska, and we're seeing the momentum, especially as we get closer to November. We're seeing the momentum really pick up, and people that may say, well, I don't share your views in other areas, but I don't want my right to abortion restricted. And that's been just a huge driver over the last several months.
So, Congressman,
is it just me, or does this not sound like Cori Bush? What happened to that firebrand, that energy that Cori Bush brought when she was running for office? What happened to that Cori Bush? I don't believe her here. It's interesting that she brings up the Democrats' chances with the midterms. She's confident about it, about holding the House. It's interesting because Chuck Schumer is not. And I talked about this like a week or two ago. Chuck Schumer stated that there's cause for concern. He's not certain that they will hold on to the House. Now that came from Chuck Schumer. So this is really interesting to me. Really interesting. Now, there was something she said there, and I don't know if you caught it, but they are now referring to November as Roe-vember in reference to Roe v. Wade. They are using Roe v. Wade as a tactic, a marketing strategy to get people to come out and vote for the Democrats. They are basically holding your vote hostage. You got to come out and vote for us, or otherwise there's nothing we can do about Roe v. Wade. And I think everybody should be pushing back on them and saying, if you really cared that much about it, why didn't you do anything about it before? Why didn't you abolish the filibuster when Barack Obama was in office? Why didn't you codify Roe v. Wade into law several decades ago? It's been 50 years. It's been 50 years. And some people forget this wasn't always a Democrat issue per se. And I want to give you an example for people who are not aware and don't know about the history of abortions in this country. Did you know that at one point in this country, Catholic priests used to give abortions? A lot of people don't know about that. When we talk about Roe v. Wade, the win of Roe v. Wade, that happened under Republican Supreme Court. A lot of people don't talk about that either. So I like to always bring up the history so that you understand why things are the way they are today. So what did that tell you? If it happened, it was granted under Republican court. The Democrats had plenty of time to codify it into law. Plenty of time. Look it up.
I wanted to go right there. When you talk to your constituents, when you and your colleagues talk to voters across the country, how big of a role is the right to abortion as in front of voters' minds, balanced with their concerns about economic issues?
I've seen it play out both ways. I've seen it play out. This is the abortion rights are a number one issue because some people are looking at it's not just about me, it's about my children and my children's children. But also when we're talking about economics, people are saying, well, gas prices are going down, but utilities are going up. So how are we addressing that? But we have, as Congress, we have looked at that. The president has made strides to help bring costs down, but also using the Defense Production Act to be able to help with inflation and to bring costs down. And we have a lot more work to do, but the big push, that momentum is as it relates to reproductive freedom. And that is why I am actually hosting a statewide tour all around the state of Missouri. I'm looking okay for my seat in November, so I'm going out to help other folks. We have a U.S. Senate race happening that we cannot allow to go to the Republican who's running. We have a horrible, I'm going to call it horrible candidate running for our U.S. Senate seat. Plus, I believe we have another seat that is flippable if we just do the work.
Let's interject here for a second. There was something she said here that just really rubbed me the wrong way.
We're addressing that, but we have, as Congress, we have looked at that. The president has made strides to help bring costs down, but also using the Defense Production Act to be able to help with inflation and to bring costs down. And we have
the Inflation Reduction Act actually doesn't help inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act actually does not bring those costs down. Remember, we talked about this before when they first passed that bill. We said this actually has nothing to do with inflation. It was just basically a even more watered down version of Build Back Better. And they gave it a different name that would sound appealing to people. So the American people could say, oh, yay, they're going to try to address inflation. But it actually did not address inflation. So here's Cori Bush basically repeating the same talking points of Ro Khanna and Joe Biden. Who wrote this message for Cori Bush? I don't even believe these words came from her. There's no way you can tell me that this is the same person who was out in the streets protesting in Ferguson. What happened to Cori Bush?
a lot more work to do, but the big push, that momentum is as it relates to reproductive freedom, and that is why I am actually hosting a statewide tour all around the state of Missouri. I'm looking okay for my seat in November, so I'm going out to help other folks. We have a U.S. Senate race happening.
I'm looking okay for my seat in November, so I'm going out to help other folks. What if you weren't looking okay for your seat in November? Would you still not go out to help other folks? Am I the only one that caught that?
That we cannot allow to go to the Republican who's running. We have a horrible, I'm going to call it horrible candidate running for our U.S. Senate seat. Plus, I believe we have another seat that is flippable if we just do the work.
Congresswoman, your memoir tells a remarkable story of your journey from being a minimum wage worker, a survivor of domestic and sexual violence, being an unhoused parent, and moving through all of these phases, all of these challenges in your life to becoming a member of Congress. Talk about how that helps you represent those that too often have nobody remembering their plights day in and day out.
I remember the pain from all of it still today. And I'm not saying that that's healthy. I am in therapy, but I remember the pain of being hungry and only making sure that my children were eating. I remember the fear that I had of closing my eyes too long at night, sleeping in the car, afraid that one of my children wouldn't wake up. I remember the pain of being brutalized by police officers where They threw my body up in the air and I landed on the ground and I was stomped. I won't forget the pain. I remember the pain of all of those sexual assaults, the pain of the domestic violence when I was left for dead. I remember that, and I walk with that every single day because there are people still going through that right now. And as I go to sleep at night, somebody is hurting, somebody's sleeping on the street, somebody is in an abusive relationship, and we go on with our lives as if it doesn't affect us, as if because we don't see it, it's not a thing. Well, I feel it. I feel it, and so I'm going to continue to fight. As long as I breathe, I will fight for my people.
And Cori, you know, I understand that you remember that pain. The president who you continue to defend has been accused of sexual assault by 11 different women. 11 different women. People like to mention Tara Reid. It wasn't just Tara Reid. So I understand that you remember that pain. How can you still defend Joe Biden? And this is the problem with the two-party system, because let's be real. Let's be real here. If it was the other way around, and if Joe Biden was a Republican sitting in the White House, would Cori Bush say that she supports the president? Would she defend Joe Biden? No, she wouldn't. It would be okay for her to go against him because he's not on her team. But because he's on her team, she's told not to speak badly about him. All of them, all of those progressives sitting there, they say nothing about it. AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, all three of them are survivors of sexual assault. Where was that same empathy and support for people like Tara Reid when they came out against the same person that you constantly defend and say is doing a good job? Does it not matter when it's in your party?
Given that you've shared so much of these really deeply painful feelings in this book, what are you hoping viewers will take away and do from reading this book?
You know, I've been criticized for pushing too hard, or my stance in certain areas. Why do you push so hard for police reform? Why do you push so hard for the rights for bodily autonomy? Why do you push so hard? That's the reason. The reason is it's listed in this book. You know, I write about how hard it is, and pitfall after pitfall, hardship after hardship. And is it because I just deserve to have all of these horrible things happen to me? Did I deserve to walk through life in such a terrible way, for some of those years? Was it because it's just me? No. Some of this is policy violence, and so we should fix it through policy.
But you're not fixing it through policy. Some of this is policy violence. I agree. Some of it is policy. Some of the worst crimes that have been committed against the American people has been done through legislation. I totally agree with that. But you're not fighting against it. You're not. What are you doing to push back on it, boo? What are you doing? When are you guys using your leverage to push back on those same policies that are destroying people's lives? When? There's no way you can tell me that's the same woman. There's no way. Now, she went on to dance around about this with Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib celebrating this book. And I got to tell you, see, this is what it's all about. This is what they care about now. Let me make this larger for you guys because I'm sharing it via stream.
Come on, come on. Okay. Y'all ready? Yeah. Okay, y'all open it with me. She gonna cry. No.
Wow.
So, do you guys see the problem? This is what they're focused on. This is where their focus is at. Mind you, I want to remind you, Cori Bush did come to the Medicare for All March last year in DC. Do you know what Cori Bush said? We do not agree with what you guys are doing. We do not agree with what you guys are doing. Didn't you run on Medicare for All? If you don't agree with it, why are you at the march? Go home since you don't agree. Oh, I see. We have to get your approval. We got to get Bernie Sanders' approval. We got to get the squad members' approval to do direct action on the outside before we do anything. No, F that. You guys left us. You abandoned us. And all you care about now is writing books and posing on the cover of Vogue magazine. This is what it's all about now. They just wanted to be celebrity politicians. Look at this. They gave Cori Bush a book. I'm sure they've given AOC one. They'll all get books. What have they done?
Look at that powerful. That's powerful. Oh my God. Y'all ready? Hey. Oh, all right, the forerunner, Cori Bush, a story of pain and perseverance in America. Today is the day. Look at that. Praise for Cori Bush. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Damn.
I can't show any more of it. This is what they're doing. This is what they're doing. Now, I also want to show you. I'm not sure where my thing just went. There we go. I also want to show you how they're trying to profit off of this. This is what I was telling you guys. Hashtag dim exit, by the way. Dim exit was trending because people are starting to see through the bullshit. Look at what they're doing. Hashtag dim exit. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats have had 4 or 5 decades to codify Roe versus Wade, but they didn't. Why? Too valuable as a campaign fundraising issue and political strategy. Look at this. Roe-vember. Roe-vember. By the way, you see this name right here, Midas Touch? You see these guys? Remember that name. They've smeared progressives, by the way. Midas Touch. Look at this. Roe-vember. This is what they're doing. This is where they're at now. And Nevada County commented and said, Midas Touch is a liberal American political action committee formed in March 2020 with the purpose to stop the re-election of Donald Trump in the 2020 United States presidential election. This crazy? Look at this. Planned Parenthood dumps $45 million a year into Democrat election efforts in order to ensure their $1.5 billion a year industry. They should get their money back. Look, this is what they're doing. Let's see how we can make this profitable. Let's see how we can use this as our advantage to get people to come back in the midterms. You've done such a poor job. This is what they have to rely on. And how's that really working out? Because just a couple of days ago, I showed you the numbers in Texas of how many people actually care about abortion as the first number one issue. The majority of people in Texas did not care about abortion as the number one issue. The number one issue was the economy. That's why someone like Beto is losing right now in the polls. Even though Governor Abbott hasn't been a great governor, because Beto was choosing to run on that type of issue, not saying it shouldn't be present, but when your sole focus is that, and you're denying how bad the economy is right now because it's the Democrat president, people see through that. Raziel, the great. The number one issue is always the economy. This is what that right? Let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat at Kid. Salute Sabby and RBN crew for rallying to help JB. Saw him and mom and happy the community built was able to help them. That's right. And thank you to all you guys that donated to JB's housing fundraiser, because you guys really came through. Like, really. JB was so appreciative, by the way. Colin says Cori Bush has now secured her generational wealth. She should be embarrassed that she hasn't worked towards our generational wealth. She got hers. Thank you for the super chat. Praying Mantis. Looks like brunch to me. Yeah, it looked like brunch to me too, Praying Mantis. See the change. Thank you. Yes, Sabby. As Black women, we should call out other liberal Black women. Can't blame gender or race. Simply the facts. Dude, she's completely changed. These people are so different now. So different. I'm going to show you one in a second. And thank you for the super chat. Staccato. David. I'm done with this one party dance of distracting the people. If this government does not work for the people in their house, then let it fall on its face. No one should vote Republican or Democrat. Bingo. And David, I see that you like anime. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. All well said. Thank you for this tip on Rockfin, JVB. At this point, they are naked, pandering clowns. They don't believe in anything, apparently, but everything is fair game. Well said. Well said. And thank you for this super chat, Sean. Please make this a clip and short. Fight them. We can do that. Eric does the clips and the shorts. Well, Eric does the clips. Okay. And we're going to show you another transformation. Now we're going to get into this story about AOC hypocrisy here. For those who have not been aware, Governor Abbott and Governor Ron DeSantis have sent migrants from their states to some of these cities that have been identified as these sanctuary cities. So they sent a group to Martha's Vineyard here in Massachusetts, and they also sent a group to New York City. And I believe there was also a group sent to right outside of Kamala Harris's house. Obviously, this was a political move. Obviously, that's what this is really about. Let's just be real here. So they're trying to show, oh, let's just see how much they care about these migrants. They say they want to be sanctuary cities. So let's just go ahead and send them there and let's see how well they handle it and how they deal with it. I covered what happened in Martha's Vineyard twice, and I gave you guys an update on that. We talked about the migrant situation in New York City, and Mayor Eric Adams said that he was setting up basically like these tent communities for the migrants so that they would have a place to stay. Part of this apparently was in AOC's district. Now, before I tell you what she did, I want to remind you of what she did in the past in reference to the migrant situation that was happening at the border. Now, this is John from TYT, from the Damage Report. I just want to remind you of how AOC felt about the migrants then. And then I'm going to tell you what she did with the migrants in New York City.
I want to go back a year to literally the day or two before we first had who would then later become Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was down at the border visiting these facilities. She came back to her district. She Skyped into the show and talked about the experience. There were some photos that were taken at the time that weren't released until just yesterday. And here is one. There's others that you can see on her feed, but she's literally breaking down at what she's seeing there. And understand that she was having that 100% understandable, and I would say it should be the demanded response to what we're seeing there. This is before we knew about so much of it. We didn't know how horrendous the conditions were. We hadn't seen in a period of just a few months 6 kids dying, but she had a human response. And honestly, the opposition on the other side, they hate her for that. They're mocking her right now on Twitter for tearing up at this horrendous stain on our history that we're writing every day. Someday, hopefully, people will be able to look back with a little bit of perspective and know how right we were to speak out against these policies, to identify them as concentration camps. But that.
Okay, there's something that John said here that's really important. You make sure because you have to remember when this took place.
To send a message to Mexico, to Guatemala, to El Salvador, all those countries. We don't want you to come, and so we're gonna convince you that if you get over here, you're going to suffer. Some of you might die. That is the official government policy. And so Melania doesn't care, Donald Trump doesn't care. I just wanna end with something I noticed, and it struck out as any human should respond to what we're seeing here in exactly the way I'm going to show you. Not as Melania did, with at best ignorance, if not disdain for these kids, and not trying to pass the buck like Donald Trump while putting horrendous, savage policies into place. I wanna go back a year to literally the day or two before we first had, who would then later become Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was down at the border visiting these facilities. She came back to her district, she Skyped into the show and talked about the experience. There were some photos that were taken at the time that weren't released.
What's important to remember there, what John said, this was before AOC won. This was before she won. So just keep that in mind. She's still campaigning. Look at this picture. Look at this image. Remember, she was crying. She was so distraught. Broken up. There were multiple pictures. Now this video was uploaded. Why do they do this now where it shows it all the way at the bottom? It's kind of weird. I don't know why it's like this on here where you can't see the date. But the video's old, damn it. I don't know why I can't see the date on here anymore. This is weird. Oh, here we go. 2018, July of 2018. Okay. So remember, that's before she won. Let's see what her response is about the migrants today when they show up in her district. Now, I hate that Fox News got this right. I really do. But shout out to Case Study QB for clipping this. Let's see how she feels today. Now that she's already in office and she's no longer campaigning, and the president is not Republican, he's a Democrat. Let's see what she does now about those migrants.
The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, has changed the location of that migrant tent city. It's going to move from Orchard Beach in the Bronx to Randall's Island. This happened after AOC complained it was in her district. Congresswoman Nicole Meletakis, Republican from New York, there are a few, joins me now. Congresswoman, AOC clearly has some real clout within the Democrat Party.
AOC complained about the migrant tent being in her district. She complained about it. Not in her backyard. You see the problem? Where's those tears? Where's those same tears that she had for those kids when she went down to the border? Oh, remember what John told you. She hadn't won yet. She was still campaigning. She's an actress. It gets worse. Listen to this.
Well, you know, it's interesting that she was complaining because she was the first one to say that she supports a sanctuary policy. She supports open borders, but it seems when it's in her backyard, she's against it.
What's going on here?
Well, look, it's an unsustainable policy. We need to get the mayor on board with those of us who are calling on the president to secure the border once and for all. You had 4 million people cross since this president has taken office, including those on the terrorist watch list, including those who are repeat offenders and criminals. It's a very unsustainable policy now that the taxpayers of New York City and America are being forced to pay for, at the tune of New York City alone, $1 billion.
And we're putting them on cruise ships. But you know, I mean, calling for the border to be closed, it's not going to happen. I mean, it simply is not going to happen, is it?
I believe it can happen if
How?
we take that, because if we take the House, if we take the Senate, we will have more leverage to push back on this administration. Unfortunately, what you're seeing taking place right now is happening under one-party rule. When President Trump was in office, he put in place policies that restored order at the border. We were seeing people coming in orderly, having their claims heard. They had to remain in Mexico or on the other side of the border until those court cases were heard. Now what you're seeing is 4 million people entering our country. Many don't return back for their court cases. Right. And you have a mayor in New York City who is saying that the taxpayers of New York have to pay for the housing, the education, the health care, and the support for those individuals. I mean, my parents are immigrants. No one ever paid for their housing when they came here.
That is all understood.
And
people always kill me when they come with that argument, when they always say, my parents were immigrants. My parents did this. My grandparents were immigrants. That was also a long time ago.
I have a mayor in New York City who is saying that the taxpayers of New York have to pay for the housing, the education, the health care, and the support for those individuals. I mean, my parents are immigrants. No one ever paid for their housing when they came here.
That is all understood. But you've got millions of them. They are here. I mean, they're here. They're not going back. They're simply not going to go back. So what should we do with them whilst they are here? We have reports that there are vans picking up Venezuelans in New York City and taking them to work on the cleanup in Florida. Do you approve of them working?
I approve of them working once they are approved for asylum. But if you have people here working illegally,
you'll never get that.
That is wrong.
Girl, there have been people living here working illegally for a long time. And some of the same people complaining about this, a lot of rich people, some of their landscapers, some of their cooks, some of their maids are also here working illegally. So I don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. Probably some of hers too. Let's be real. But I think the point to mention too is that these are asylum seekers. But that just makes the situation even worse for AOC, because if you know they're trying to seek asylum, that's why they're here. Why would you push them out? It's in my district, so they must go. No, just years ago, you were crying at the border. Oh my God, they're in the cages. Oh dear God. How many times has she talked about those kids in those cages since Joe Biden has been president, since there's been a Democrat president? Now you have migrants coming into your district where Eric Adams set up a tent community for them and you push them out? That's hypocritical to me. That's hypocritical, whether you're for this type of immigration or not. How can you be so sad and empathetic 1 minute and then the next minute you're pushing them, you're kicking them out?
Going to have 2 or 3 or 4 million people just sitting around doing nothing, not allowed to work.
That's why the court cases have to be heard quickly. You know,
but they're not going to be heard quickly.
Well, they have to add judges. That can be resolved.
But they're not going to be heard quickly.
Well, why not? Why can't we get to a resolution here where these cases are heard? We had 4 million people coming from 60 different countries. Many don't even qualify for asylum. That's why they have to add judges at the border, to make sure that they're being heard. Then they can proceed and enter the country. They can work and sustain and support themselves. This process that this mayor and this governor are supporting is irrational. It's unsustainable. It's not compassionate for the migrants who are being trafficked, for the drugs that are coming in and killing Americans, or for the American taxpayers that are being forced to foot the bill for all of this.
It's a contentious issue, but we're very glad to have you on in the studio discussing it. It's a very big deal.
Now, let's not be fooled by her either, though. If I'm not mistaken, let me see if he mentioned her again. I think, because if this is the same woman.
The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, has changed the location of that migrant tent city. It's going to move from Orchard Beach in the Bronx to Randall's Island. This happened after AOC complained it was in her district.
And notice what it says here. NYC mayor moves migrant tent city after protest. So she didn't mind. See, you know what? She pays attention to the things she want to pay attention to. Oh, we can't have those migrants here. Move them out of my district. It's really messed up. I hope people, all these AOC stands, I hope they really see AOC for what she truly is. I told you she was an actress. I told you she lied about her background. I told you she was not working class. I told you she went to BU. I told you she interned for Ted Kennedy. I told you she had a startup. This woman was a fraud. And it's okay to admit that. Whether you canvassed for her, whether you donated money to her, it is okay to admit that we got played and this woman is a fraud.
Congresswoman Nicole Militatis, Republican from New York, there are a few, joins me now. Congresswoman, AOC.
Yes, this is the woman. Let me fast forward so you can see her face. I thought she looked familiar. This is the woman that is against ending qualified immunity for police officers. This one right here. Remember that. So this is who AOC is now. You see what's happening with these Justice Democrats? Cori Bush, AOC Cori Bush is probably the biggest disappointment. The biggest disappointment. This is terrible. I feel like this was all a grift. I really think that Justice Democrats was just a grift. Terrible. Terrible. I'm gonna go to some of the comments and then I have something else to. What is this? Oh, you put this here, Eric? Oh, JB said, what will another congressperson having a book deal do for you and your family? That's a good one. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Aye. See the change. Damn, Sabby, you are so good at this. Your call outs are deep stuff I probably wouldn't have known or thought about. Oh, thank you. I have a good memory. So I remember what people said when they were running, you know. I watched a lot of this stuff. Thank you for the super chat. Praying Mantis. She is a mime. Remember the invisible handcuffs? I remember. You don't remember? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Monarch says, what is AOC's excuse for refusing immigrants? It was in her district. See how people are? They're all for this stuff until it shows up in their backyard. Not in my district, not in my neighborhood, not in my town. Soul Raster says AOC in training to be the next Nancy Pelosi. I agree. I could see that. I could see that. Haha, I forgot about that one, JB. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Shout out to Case Study QB. That's right. Case is always getting these clips, man. I don't know how he does it because I don't think I could watch that much mainstream media. Thank you for the tip, Roger Meadows. Catholic priests performing abortions. I will raise the bar. You spoke of Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger, the founder of it, created it to keep the Black population from growing because she called us weeds that keep sprouting up. She was a eugenicist. Oh, it's all coming out tonight. And thank you for this tip as well. None of these clown parties got the answer. Securing the border won't work. Crack down on employers who are skirting labor laws and stop running coups in their country. This is another reason why you're beginning to see Black men begin to vote Republican, because this is displacing Black people who would otherwise have had those jobs, but probably would withhold their labor to get more until bosses relented. Interesting, Roger. Interesting. And thank you for this tip as well. I saw Nick, your comrade, say that our country disrupt Latin American governments to try to justify capitalism over socialism. But I think it has more to do with white supremacy, because if it was to justify capitalism, why are they not doing the same to those Scandinavian countries? That's a good point. Interesting. Guys, go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Thank you for the super chat, Sam. It's because they don't have a vote. Interesting. I want to play that that video, Eric. I don't know if I still have that or not. I have to pull it up before I head out because I want people to see that. Definitely support that, you guys. Should be a really good event this Saturday. There's going to be a lot of people. I'm excited, but I'm also a little nervous because I don't know. We're meeting a lot of people at once. But I'm also going to try to stream it too. Oh, I found it. Okay. So these are the speakers. I hope you guys, if you're in the DC area, I hope you can make it. If not, like I said, we are going to stream it. So either way, you'll get to see what happens. And here are all of your speakers for Hands Off Assange this Saturday, October 8th, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. U.S. Department of Justice. That's 950 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest. Here they are. All right. There will also be an event surrounding Parliament that same day. They're supposed to form like a human chain around Parliament. So there'll be an event in London, the event in DC, and I believe there's also supposed to be one in Australia as well. So definitely, guys, I think, well, I'm sure I'm probably not going to be the only person streaming this event. Hopefully there's someone in London that can stream the one at the Parliament. That one will be huge. So check it out, guys. Again, I just want to remind you, I'm not here tomorrow night, no live show. I'll just upload clips. And I'm also not here Monday because I'll be coming back home Monday. So I'll upload clips for Monday as well. So the next time you'll see me live will be Saturday for this event and then Tuesday. So no call-in show tonight. I still have a couple things to do for finished packing. Did I get all the ones on? Okay, I got all the ones on Rockfin. I still have a couple things to do. I have to finish packing and all that fun jazz. But yeah, super pumped, super excited, you guys. I got to head out. I actually have to go to the store before they close. I just remembered that. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. See you Saturday. Hope to see some of you in person. And you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.